What if the last thing you heard before falling asleep was breathing that wasn't yours? Not the wind, not the house, not your imagination. Someone else, in the room, watching you, waiting for you to close your eyes. Every single night, thousands of people hand a stranger the keys to where they sleep. They scroll through photos on a screen, read a handful of reviews, type in their card details, and just like that, they're trusting a complete stranger with the most vulnerable hours of their day. They climb into an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar town, pull the covers up, and tell themselves that everything is fine, that the lock on the door will hold, that the darkness in the corners is just darkness, that they are alone. But sometimes they are not. Sometimes the house has a history the listing never mentions. Sometimes the photos were taken at a very specific angle for a very specific reason. Sometimes the reviews that would have told you everything you needed to know were quietly removed before you ever had a chance to read them. Welcome to Silent Fear. Tonight we have 3 stories from 3 real people who booked what they thought was a safe place to rest their heads. 3 people who did everything right, checked the ratings, read the descriptions, followed the instructions. And what they got in return is something that none of them have ever been fully able to explain, even now, long after the trips ended and the bags were unpacked and life went back to normal. Because some things do not go back to normal. Some things stay with you in the quiet moments, in the dark, right before you fall asleep. Before we get into it, drop a comment right now and tell us where in the world you are watching from tonight. We have listeners from every corner of the globe, and we genuinely read every single one. And if you have not yet joined the Silent Fear family, hit that subscribe button right now. We post new stories every single week, and trust us, you do not want to fall behind. The stories only get stranger from here. Now turn the lights down, get comfortable, and whatever you do, do not check under the bed until we are finished. Michael had been planning the drive for weeks. He was relocating from Portland, Oregon down to Southern California, where his sister lived, and rather than fly and ship everything separately, he decided to load up his car and make a road trip out of it. He mapped the whole thing out carefully. 2 days of driving, a stop somewhere in Northern California to sleep and reset, then the final push down to his sister's place the following afternoon. Clean. Simple. Nothing to worry about. He started looking for a place to stay about a week before the trip. He did not need anything fancy. 1 night, 1 bed, a working shower. He found a listing in a small town called Red Bluff that fit perfectly. A 2-bedroom, single-story house set back from the main road, a few miles outside of town. The price was low. The photos showed a tidy living room and a neat little kitchen, and the handful of reviews it had were all positive. People said it was quiet. They said it was clean. They said the host was responsive. Michael booked it without hesitation and did not think about it again until he was pulling off the highway that night. It was just after 10 when he turned down the gravel driveway. The headlights swept across the front of the house, and his first thought was that it looked smaller than it did in the photos. His second thought was that it looked older. The paint on the front was peeling in a few places, and one of the porch steps had a crack running down the middle that someone had filled in badly with what looked like cement. But the lights inside were working, the lockbox was right where the host said it would be, and the key turned smoothly in the front door. Inside it was better. Clean floors, a sofa that looked recently vacuumed. A small kitchen with a coffee maker and a row of mugs hanging on hooks underneath the cabinets. Michael walked through the space quickly, the way anyone does when they arrive somewhere new, just checking that everything is where it should be. Living room, kitchen, small bathroom with a window frosted over. Then the 2 bedrooms. The first bedroom was at the front of the house, no lock on the door, just a plain handle that turned freely in both directions. He moved on. The second bedroom was at the back, and it did have a lock, a simple push button in the center of the knob. Nothing serious, but enough that he could secure himself inside for the night. He dropped his overnight bag on the floor next to the bed and sat down on the mattress to check his phone. It was then, in the stillness of that back bedroom, that he noticed the smell. It was subtle enough that he had not caught it when he first came in. A dampness. Not mold exactly, not rot. Just the particular smell of a space that had been closed off for a long time. Like a room that had not had fresh air moved through it in weeks, maybe longer. He got up and checked the window. It was sealed shut, painted over from the outside so that even if he wanted to open it, he would not have been able to without a tool. He stood there for a moment, looking at that sealed window, and felt the first small pull of unease that he quickly shook off. Old house. Probably just needed airing out. He brushed his teeth, changed into his sleep clothes, and got into bed. He was lying there in the dark, just on the edge of sleep, when he heard the first sound. A creak, low and slow and rhythmic, like weight shifting on old floorboards. The kind of sound that has a pattern to it, one that suggests intention rather than settling. He opened his eyes and lay completely still. The sound continued for 3 or 4 seconds and then stopped. He waited. Silence. He closed his eyes again and tried to place where it had come from. The hallway, maybe? Or the other bedroom? He reminded himself again that old houses make noise. He had lived in an old house before. He knew how they breathed. He was almost asleep a second time when it came back. Closer now. Much closer. Right outside the bedroom door. That same slow, deliberate creak. One step, then another. Then silence again. Michael sat up and looked at the door. The push-button lock was engaged. He could see it in the dark, that small round circle of the button pressed inward. He sat there with his heart moving faster than he wanted to admit, staring at the door handle, waiting for it to move. It did not move. He sat there for a full 2 minutes before he heard the next thing. And the next thing was worse than the creak. 3 knocks. Soft but clear. From inside the closet, not from the door, not from the hallway. From inside the closet that sat directly to the right of the bed, its door closed, its handle the same plain design as every other handle in the house. Michael did not move for a long moment. He sat on the edge of the bed and stared at that closet door and told himself every rational thing he could think of. An animal, a pipe, settling. Sound traveling strangely through old walls. The knocks came again. 1, 2, 3. The same spacing, the same soft deliberateness. He grabbed his phone off the nightstand, turned on the flashlight, crossed the room, and pulled the closet door open in one motion. Nothing. Hanging clothes, a couple of wire hangers, a shelf of folded towels near the top. The damp smell hit him harder in here, stronger and more concentrated, and he stood in the doorway of that closet with the flashlight sweeping every corner. That is when the beam caught something low on the back wall. A panel. roughly 2 feet wide and maybe 18 inches tall. Wooden, with a simple hinged edge on one side, and on the other side, clearly visible, a small sliding latch. On his side of the wall, Michael crouched down and looked at that latch for a long time. It was a simple mechanism, the kind you slide across to hold a door closed from the outside. It was currently in the closed position, meaning whatever was behind that panel could not latch it from within. Someone on this side had closed it. Someone standing right where Michael was standing now had slid that latch across from this side and walked away. He did not open it. He stood up, backed out of the closet, grabbed his overnight bag, shoved his toiletries inside without bothering to pack them properly, picked up his car keys, and walked out of the bedroom. He walked through the living room and out the front door without looking back. He sat in his car in the driveway with all the doors locked and the engine idling, and he did not go back inside. He sat there until 4 a.m, watching the front of that house, and nothing moved. No lights came on, no doors opened. At 4, he typed a message to the host explaining that he had left early, and that there may be someone on the property, and that they should check the closet in the back bedroom and possibly call the police. He watched the message deliver. He watched the 2 small check marks appear that meant it had been read. Then he put the car in reverse and drove. He made it to his sister's by early afternoon. He told her about the panel and the latch, and she asked him if he had called the police himself. He said he had not. He still does not know why. He just wanted to be somewhere else. The host never replied. Not that day, not the next, not ever. Hannah and Daniel had been together for 11 years and married for 6 of them, and they had been talking about taking a proper anniversary trip for almost as long as they had been married. Something always came up. Work, family obligations, the particular exhaustion of life that makes even simple plans feel complicated. But this year, Hannah put her foot down and booked something before either of them had a chance to talk themselves out of it. She found the listing on a Tuesday evening while Daniel was washing dishes. A waterfront property on the Georgia coast, 2 nights, a wraparound porch that faced the water, hardwood floors throughout, a porch swing. The photos were the kind that make you feel warm just looking at them. Golden light through wooden blinds. A mug of coffee on the porch railing with water blurred softly behind it. She called Daniel over and he leaned down to look at the screen and said, "Book it," before she could change her mind. She read the reviews carefully the way she always did, sorting them oldest to newest, looking for patterns. Most of them were wonderful. People talked about the quiet, the view, the way the light hit the water in the evening. A few mentioned minor things, a slow drain in the shower, a screen door that did not latch quite right, ordinary imperfections. And then near the bottom, posted about 7 months before Hannah found the listing, a review from someone identified only as 2 initials. The review itself was brief. It said the property was lovely and the location was perfect. And then at the end, almost as an afterthought, it said this: "Be polite to the woman next door. She takes the property very personally." Hannah screenshot it and texted it to Daniel. He called it cryptic. She messaged the host directly and asked about it. The host replied within the hour, warm and reassuring. She explained that the neighbor, an older woman who had lived next door for many years, could sometimes be a little territorial about the property. She said she would reach out to the neighbor ahead of their arrival, and let her know they were coming, what they looked like, how long they would be staying. She said in all the time she had been renting the place, it had never been a real problem. Hannah thanked her and tried not to think about it anymore. They arrived on a Friday evening just as the sun was beginning to lower itself toward the water. The door code worked on the first try, and they stepped into a house that smelled like cedar and faintly of lavender. It was even more beautiful in person than it had looked in the photos. They unpacked slowly, opened a bottle of wine they had brought from home, and took it out to the porch. The swing moved gently in the evening breeze, and the water caught the last of the orange light. And for the first time, in what felt like years, Hannah felt completely relaxed. They stayed on the porch until the sky was fully dark, and then went inside and made a simple dinner and talked the way they used to talk when they had time to talk. About nothing in particular, about everything. They were in bed by 10:30, both of them asleep within minutes. The next evening, Saturday, they had spent the day on the water and come back pleasantly tired, their skin warm from the sun. They were back on the porch just after 9. The wine open again, the water invisible now in the dark but audible. The soft, consistent sound of it lapping at the low bank below the property. That was when Samantha appeared. She came not from the road and not from the front of the neighboring house, but from the hedge line between the two properties. A thick row of overgrown shrubs that marked the boundary of the yard. She simply materialized out of the dark between the branches and walked toward the porch with her arms folded tightly across her chest, moving with the unhurried certainty of someone who had walked this path many times before. She was older, somewhere in her late 60s, with white hair pinned back severely and a set to her jaw that suggested a person who had spent a great deal of her life being disappointed. She stopped at the edge of the porch light and looked at Hannah and Daniel with an expression that Hannah would later struggle to describe accurately. It was not anger exactly, not the sharp, sudden anger of someone who has been provoked. It was older than that, heavier, like something that had been carried for a very long time. "They keep sending people," she said. Her voice was low and even. She was not speaking to them directly, more as if she were speaking to the air between them, or to someone neither of them could see. "They keep sending people and nobody ever asks me." Daniel set his wine glass down carefully and said hello. He introduced himself and Hannah. He kept his voice calm and pleasant, the way he always did when he sensed a situation needed to be handled carefully. Samantha looked at him while he spoke, and when he finished, she did not acknowledge anything he had said. Her name was Samantha, she told them. She had lived in the house next door for 22 years. The house they were staying in, the one behind them, had belonged to her brother. She did not say what had happened to her brother. She did not need to. She said she did not like strangers sleeping in his rooms. She said it the way someone might state a fact about the weather, without heat, without apology. Hannah told her they understood. She told her they were only there for 2 nights, and that they would be quiet and respectful, and that they were very sorry if their being there was difficult for her. Samantha looked at Hannah for a long moment and then nodded once, a single slow movement of her head, and turned and walked back to the hedge line and stepped into the darkness between the branches as smoothly as she had emerged from it. Hannah and Daniel looked at each other across the small porch table and didn't say anything for a while. Then they went inside and locked the door and tried to finish their evening. At 2:17 in the morning, Daniel woke up and could not immediately identify why. He lay in the dark and listened. And then he heard it. The porch swing, moving in a slow, controlled rhythm, back and forth, back and forth. The soft creak of the chain and the subtle groan of the wood, steady and unhurried. The sound of someone sitting in it. Someone with weight. Someone who was in no particular hurry to go anywhere. He lay there and listened to it for nearly a full minute before he got up. He moved through the dark house carefully and stood at the front door and looked out through the narrow window beside it. The porch was lit faintly by a small bulb above the door. He could see the swing clearly. It was moving, swaying with the distinct rhythm of occupancy. And it was empty. He stood there watching the empty swing move and told himself wind. He told himself it was just the right kind of breeze to catch it and set it going. He almost believed it. Then he reached for the door handle to step out and check, and his hand froze. The door was unlocked. The deadbolt was thrown back. He had locked this door himself before bed. He remembered doing it. He remembered hearing the click of it engaging and checking the handle to confirm it had caught. And it was now standing open, the bolt fully retracted, the door needing only a single pull to open. He locked it again. He checked every window in the house. He went back to bed and did not sleep. He did not tell Hannah until morning because he did not want to frighten her in the dark, and there was nothing to be done about it until daylight anyway. In the morning, they made coffee and carried it out to the porch, the way they had the morning before. They were halfway down the steps when they both stopped. Footprints, small and narrow and pressed into the soft, damp wood of the porch boards in a trail of dried mud. They led from the bottom of the porch steps up to the front door and back again, back and forth. The same path twice. Someone had come up those steps, walked to the front door, and returned the way they came. The prints were too small for Daniel. They were about the right size for a woman. They were packed and in the car by 11. Hannah pulled up the listing on her phone on the drive home to start composing a review and found that the listing had been removed. Not just unlisted. Removed. Like it had never been there at all. It was James who first noticed something was wrong. He and his 3 college friends, 4 of them, total had rented a house in the Texas Hill Country for a long October weekend. The kind of trip they had been talking about taking since freshman year, and had only just gotten around to actually booking now that they were almost done with school. A proper house with a pool and a fire pit and enough land around it that they would not have to worry about bothering anyone. The photos showed rolling hills going gold in the autumn light and a wide open sky that seemed to go on forever. It looked like exactly the kind of place where nothing bad could possibly happen. The drive out was long, but they were in good spirits when they arrived on Thursday afternoon. The house was bigger than it looked in the photos, which for once was a pleasant surprise. They split up the bedrooms, threw their bags down, opened the back door to look at the pool, and spent the rest of the afternoon exactly the way you are supposed to spend the first afternoon of a trip you have been looking forward to for a long time. They ate too much, stayed in the pool too long, and stayed up later than they should have. It was just before midnight when they finally moved from the poolside chairs to the back porch to wind down before bed. The night was clear and cold, the sky enormous and crowded with stars. in the way it only gets when you're far enough from a city. They were sitting there with their drinks getting quieter, that pleasant tired that comes from a full day in the fresh air, when James looked down the length of the property toward the road. There was a truck at the end of the driveway, not parked at the road, the way someone might park a vehicle while they checked a map or took a phone call. It was pulled a little ways onto the gravel, just far enough that it was technically on the driveway, and it was sitting with its engine off and its headlights off in the dark, a dark shape at the bottom of a long gravel path. James pointed it out quietly. They all looked. The truck did not move. No one got out. No interior light came on. It just sat there, a solid dark rectangle against the slightly less dark road beyond it. They watched it for close to 10 minutes. Someone said it was probably just a local who'd pulled off to send a text. Someone else said maybe it was someone who had taken a wrong turn and was figuring out where they were. Both of those explanations felt thin even as they were offered, but they were better than the alternative, and so they accepted them and went inside and went to bed. When James came out the next morning, the truck was gone. He stood on the back porch and looked down the length of the driveway, and there was nothing there. The gravel was empty. The road beyond it was empty. He poured himself a cup of coffee and told himself it had been nothing, and by the time the others were up, he had almost convinced himself that was true. Friday, they went into the nearest town for lunch and spent a few hours exploring and came back to the house in the early evening in better spirits. They made dinner and ate outside, and as the night came in properly, they got the fire pit going the way they had been planning to since they arrived. All four of them around the fire, the dark open land around them, the sky above them, doing what Texas skies do. It was James again who noticed it first. He was looking out past the far edge of the fire's light, the way you sometimes do when you're sitting around a fire at night, your eyes drifting to the dark beyond the circle of warmth, and he saw something that made him go very still. At the tree line, which was maybe 60 feet from where they were sitting, there was a shape. It was roughly the height and proportion of a person. It was standing completely still, and unlike the surrounding dark, which had the soft, indefinite quality of natural shadow, this shape had a solidity to it, a presence that his eyes kept returning to even when he tried to tell himself it was a tree or a post or a trick of the firelight. He said nothing at first. He kept looking at it, waiting for it to resolve into something sensible. A fence post. A tree with an unusual silhouette. Anything. It did not resolve. It stayed exactly where it was, that human-shaped stillness at the edge of the dark. Then he said quietly, "Hey, is there someone standing over there by the trees?" All four of them looked. A long silence. Then someone called out toward it. "Hello?" The sound went out into the dark and came back as nothing. One of them picked up a flashlight from the table and pointed it toward the tree line. The beam swept across the grass and hit the trees and lit up branches and ground cover and empty space. No shape, no person, nothing. They looked at each other. Someone laughed. The tight, quick kind of laugh that is mostly nerves. Someone said it must have been a deer. Maybe a coyote standing funny. They turned back to the fire and kept their conversation going, but the ease of the evening was gone, and within an hour they were all inside with the back door locked. None of them slept well. In the morning they came out one by one and gathered on the back porch with their coffee, and stood there looking at the back of the property in the early light. and James walked out across the grass toward the far edge of the property and stopped and stood there for a moment and then called the others over. Tire tracks. Not from the driveway, from the field that ran along the far left side of the property, the open strip of land between the house's boundary and the neighboring fence line. Something had driven across that field in the dark, moving slowly by the look of the tracks, and had come to a stop approximately 25 to 30 feet from the back of the house. The tracks sat there in the grass, deep and clear in the soft earth, and then turned and went back the way they had come. Whatever had made those tracks had parked there in the dark, with no headlights, within easy sight line of the fire pit where all four of them had been sitting. They stood there looking at those tracks, and nobody said anything for a while. Then one of them went around to the back door to go inside for more coffee and stopped on the step and said, "Hey guys, come look at this." Against the back door of the house, leaning against the frame as if it had been placed there with care, was a chair. A single wooden chair, old and weathered. The paint on it long since stripped down to bare gray wood by time and exposure. It was not one of the chairs from inside the house. It did not match anything in the house. It had not been there the night before, they were all certain of that. They had come in through that back door just hours ago and there had been nothing there. Someone had left it while they slept. They called the host. The phone rang and went to voicemail. They called again. Same result. They sent a message. No response. They went back inside, and within an hour, they had all made the same decision without needing to discuss it much. They were leaving. They packed quickly, not carefully the way you pack when being somewhere no longer feels like an option. They loaded the cars and drove away from that house with a full day of the rental still remaining. The host replied 4 days later. A single short message that said, "Sorry to hear you had a bad experience. I will look into it." Nothing else. No explanation. No refund. No acknowledgement of the tracks or the chair or the figure at the tree line or the truck in the driveway the night before. James still thinks about that chair. The way it was placed. Not thrown, not dropped, but set there carefully and deliberately against the door. Like someone wanted them to find it. Like someone wanted them to know they had been there all along. 3 stays. 3 rentals that looked perfectly fine on a screen. 3 groups of real people who did everything right and still ended up leaving in the dark with their hearts going too fast and their bags half packed, and the particular cold feeling of knowing that something was wrong and not being able to name exactly what. Those properties are probably still listed. Somewhere right now there is a person scrolling through photos of one of them, reading the reviews, hovering over the book button. Maybe they will notice the one strange review buried near the bottom. Maybe they will not. Read all of them, every single review, and pay attention to the ones that feel like they're trying to tell you something without quite saying it out loud. If these stories kept you awake a little longer tonight, then we did our job. Leave a comment below telling us which of the 3 stories stayed with you the most, and tell us where you are watching from. We read every single comment, and we love knowing where in the world silent fear reaches. Like this video if it gave you chills. Subscribe to Silent Fear for new stories every single week. We are just getting started, and the stories that are coming will make these 3 feel like a warm-up. Stay alert, stay aware, and remember, the lock on the door only helps if you are the only one who knows how to open it.